Welcome to the Stories of Christmas podcast. My name is MyLinda Butterworth, and I will be your teller of tales during this festive season. Today, we hear the retelling of an old Russian folktale about a childless couple who wanted more than anything to have a child to share their life with. So one year, they built a snow child. And what happens next will surprise you. In the legend of the Snow Maiden, an old Russian folktale, retold by MyLinda Butterworth. A very long time ago, in the forest of Russia, there lived a peasant named Ivan and his wife Maria. Although they had many friends and loved each other very much, they were saddened because they had no child of their own. More than anything in the world, they wanted a son or a daughter to share their love with, to laugh and play with. One winter day, they stood watching some children in the forest having a wonderful time, romping and playing in the snow. They watched as they built snowmen, and they made and threw snowballs at one another. Suddenly, Ivan turned to his wife and said, "Maria, the children look like they are having so much fun making a snowman. Why don't we make one of our own?" So Ivan and Maria went out into the forest and began making a person out of snow. Maria then said, "Ivan, since we have no children of our own, let us make a snow girl." Ivan agreed, and they proceeded to craft a pretty little maiden all made of snow. They rolled and patted the snow into dainty little hands and feet, and then they gave the little snow maiden braids and little eyes and a petite little nose and mouth. When they were finished, they thought that she was the prettiest little girl that they had ever seen. Overcome by their creation, Ivan said, "Little snow maiden, speak to me." And Maria chimed in, "Yes, won't you please come to life so you can play with the other children?" As they gazed at their little snow girl, they noticed that her eyes began to flutter and her cheeks began to glow a rosy color. At first, they thought they were imagining things, and Maria rubbed her eyes and looked again to behold a charming little girl standing before them, where only a few moments ago their snow maiden had stood. In amazement, Ivan finally said, "Where do you come from, child? Who are you?" "I have come from the land of winter, from the land of snow and ice and cold," the child replied. "I am come to be your daughter, your own little girl." With that, the little girl ran and threw her arms around the couple and hugged them, and all three of them wept for joy. When the tears ended, they all began to talk at once, and laughter followed their excitement, for this was the happiest day of their lives. They called to all their neighbors in the nearby huts and introduced them to their beautiful little girl. Everyone stayed up late that night, marveling over the miracle that had happened. There was much singing and dancing and celebrating. All during the long winter, the little snow maiden played with the other children, and her parents beamed as they beheld their little girl and thought she was the prettiest of them all. Everyone loved the little snow maiden. She was a well-mannered, happy child. She would run and play with the other children all day. Ivan and Maria were very happy. When the first signs of spring appeared, the air grew warmer. The snow started to melt, and their little snow maiden seemed to grow more tired each day. She was no longer lively and actually appeared to be unhappy. One day, she came to her parents, her eyes filled with tears, and sang a little song. "The time has come for me to go away up north to the land of snow." Her mother and father begged her to stay, saying they would not allow her to leave. They became so sad. They began to cry. Ivan jumped up and stood in front of the door to stop the little snow maiden from leaving, while Maria grabbed her and hugged her tightly. But as Maria held her little girl, the child began to melt. Soon there was nothing left of the Snow Maiden except her white fur cap and white fur coat. There, where the Snow Maiden once stood, was only a puddle of water. Maria sank to the floor and wept, while Ivan tried to console her, but he too had tears in his eyes. As Maria and Ivan talked about their daughter, they wondered if perhaps someday their little Snow Maiden might return. All summer long they were lonely. It was difficult for them to hear the children laughing, for it reminded them of their little girl. Summer turned to fall, and fall into winter. And once again the snow began to fall, and the weather was cold and icy outside. One night, as Ivan and Maria watched the snow falling outside their window, there came a knock at their door. They wondered who could be calling at this late hour. But then they heard a familiar voice singing a song. "Mother, father, open the door. The snow has brought me back once more." Ivan ran to the door and threw it open. There was their little Snow Maiden. Maria ran to her daughter, and the three of them hugged and laughed and kissed and laughed and cried. All that winter she lived with them and played with the other village children. But with each spring thaw, she returned to the land of winter from which she came, where it was always cold and ice and snow. Ivan and Maria no longer wept for their daughter, for they knew that when the weather turned cold and the snow began to blanket the land, that their little Snow Maiden would return. And so it was for the rest of their lives, that every winter the little Snow Maiden would return to the couple, and every spring she bid them farewell. And here is where I end my tale for today. But I'll be back with more stories, many more stories. Thanks for joining me today as we explore the stories from around the world. If you enjoyed this story, please let us know and subscribe. For more stories like this one, check out the book Crazy About Christmas. Until then, enjoy everything this season has to offer. See you soon.